Imagine a world where kings ruled by blood, not merit, where the rich commanded armies and the poor were voiceless shadows in the streets. Then, somewhere in the rugged hills of ancient Greece, a radical idea took root. What if everyone had a say? Not just nobles and not just warriors, but farmers, sailors, and shoemakers. What if power didn't descend from the gods, but rose up from the people? In 507 BCE, Athens didn't just develop democracy, it defied every expectation of who could wield power. It was messy, it was flawed, but it was revolutionary, and it would echo across millennia. Rome would watch. America would echo its ideals. Revolutionaries would march under its banner. But it all started with a few men, risking everything to share power. This is the story of how one city's bold experiment reshaped civilization, and why your vote today traces back to a wild political gamble made over 2,500 years ago. How Athens changed everything. Democracy didn't arrive like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't carved on a stone tablet or gifted from the gods. It came from conflict, social tension, economic despair, and the demand for fairness. Athens in the 6th century BCE was a city on the edge of chaos, and out of that chaos came one of the most groundbreaking political ideas in history. Before democracy, Athens was ruled by aristocrats, wealthy landowners who made decisions for everyone else. The poor had little say, debts were crushing, and slavery was a constant threat for anyone who couldn't pay what they owed. By 594 BCE, things were boiling over. Enter Solon, the reformer. He wasn't a king, but he had something more powerful at that moment: public trust. Solon canceled debts, freed those enslaved for owing money, and most importantly, reshaped how Athenians participated in public life. He divided society into 4 wealth-based classes, and even the lowest class, the thetes, manual laborers, could now vote in the assembly. This wasn't full democracy yet, but it cracked open the door. And then, a few decades later, someone kicked that door wide open. In 507 BCE, a nobleman named Cleisthenes took the reins during yet another power struggle in Athens. But rather than use his influence to dominate, he did something almost unthinkable. He gave power away. Cleisthenes reorganized Athens into 10 new voting districts or tribes, based not on family or class, but geography. That meant rich and poor Athenians, from coast to city to countryside, could serve together in government. He created the Council of 500, which was chosen by lottery from all 10 tribes. This group handled day-to-day administration. Think of it as Athens' first city council, except any citizen could end up on it. You didn't need wealth or lineage, just luck and citizenship. According to historian Donald Kagan of Yale University, Cleisthenes' reforms were not just administrative. They represented a real transfer of power to the ordinary citizen. It wasn't perfect. Only men and only citizens could participate. But it was radically inclusive for its time. This system was called ensinomia, or equal rights. The seeds of modern democracy were planted here. Unlike modern democracies, which are representative, we vote for people to vote for us, Athens practiced direct democracy. Every citizen could show up, raise their hand, and vote on laws. The assembly, called the ecclesia, could gather up to 6,000 citizens on the Nix Hill. Imagine standing in an open-air amphitheater, shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, literally shaping your city's destiny with your voice and your vote. To prevent corruption or tyranny, they invented the process of ostracism. Each year, citizens could vote to exile someone for 10 years, not as punishment, but as a way to protect the democracy from dangerous ambition. Even wildly popular leaders could be banished if they were seen as a threat to the balance of power. This system worked for a while. At its height, around 460 BCE, there were roughly 30,000 to 40,000 adult male citizens in Athens, out of a total population of about 250,000. That means roughly 12 to 16% of the population had direct input on laws, budgets, wars, and justice. In this atmosphere of free speech and public debate, Athens became a furnace of creativity. Socrates questioned authority. Sophocles wrote tragic plays exploring ethics and justice. Herodotus began writing history not as myth, but as investigation. The marketplace of ideas wasn't just a metaphor. It was the agora, where you could debate, argue, persuade, and protest. But this openness came at a cost. Socrates, the man who challenged minds and sparked philosophical revolutions, was sentenced to death in 399 BCE by democratic vote. His crime? Corrupting the youth and not believing in the state's gods. Democracy, it turned out, could be just as dangerous as tyranny when fear took the wheel. Democracy in Athens was never static. It shifted, evolved, collapsed, and reformed. It survived wars, betrayals, and even a brief period of oligarchy during the Peloponnesian War. Yet, for over a century, this city-state proved that ordinary people could govern themselves. They could build temples and navies, pass laws, and lead armies, not because they were noble, but because they were trusted. That trust was the true revolution. In the words of historian Josiah Ober, what made Athenian democracy work wasn't that it had perfect systems. It was that citizens believed their participation mattered. That belief was contagious, and Rome was watching. Rome's Republican experiment, influence and reinvention. When we think of Rome, democracy isn't the first word that usually springs to mind. We picture emperors in togas, roaring crowds in the Colosseum, and armies that stretched from Britain to the Middle East. But long before Rome crowned its Caesars, it built something equally world-shaking: the Republic. And what's wild is this. Much of that Roman political innovation was, in part, inspired by the Athenian experiment just across the sea. Let's rewind to 509 BCE, almost the exact time Cleisthenes was transforming Athens into the world's first democracy. In Rome, a very different revolution was underway. Romans had lived under monarchs for generations, but the last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, with a name as over-the-top as his tyranny, pushed things too far. After the tragic rape and suicide of a noblewoman named Lucretia, the people rose up. Her death became a symbol of royal abuse and injustice. The monarchy was overthrown. Out of that outrage, Rome founded its republic, a res publica, or thing of the people. No more kings. Instead, power would be shared, checked, and carefully balanced. Unlike Athens' direct democracy, Rome created a representative system, the kind most of us are familiar with today. Citizens didn't vote on laws themselves. They elected officials to do it for them. At the heart of this system were the Senate and the consuls. The Senate was made up of aristocrats, landed elites who served for life. They advised, debated, and held serious influence. The consuls, two elected leaders, shared executive power. Each had the right to veto the other. No single person could dominate, in theory. But here's the twist. While Athens opened power to a broad swath of male citizens, Rome kept its democracy mostly in elite hands. That is, until the plebeians, Rome's working class, demanded their place at the table. The early republic was essentially an aristocrats' club. The patricians, the wealthy elite, ran everything. But the plebeians, the backbone of the military, agriculture, and labor, had had enough. Beginning around 494 BCE, they staged mass protests, even walking out of the city in what historians called the secessions of the plebes. Imagine Rome grinding to a halt because every working person decided to stop playing along. It worked. In response, the plebeians were granted the tribune of the plebes, an office with real teeth. Tribunes could veto laws and protect citizens from unjust treatment. They were sacrosanct. To harm one was a death sentence. Eventually, Rome codified its laws in the 12 Tables, publicly displayed laws written in 451 BCE. Think of it as a constitution carved in stone, literally. No more secret judgments. Everyone, rich and poor, would know the rules. Now, here's where Athens and Rome meet in the middle. Both rejected the monarchy and centralized power. Both valued public debate, civic duty, and written law. Both understood that participation was power. But Rome took Athens' idea and systematized it. Where Athens had the assembly, Rome had tribunes and consuls. Where Athens trusted the people to speak directly, Rome set up a buffer, representatives to refine their will. In fact, many scholars believe that Roman elites studied Athenian politics. Cicero, Rome's most famous orator, often referenced Greek thinkers like Demosthenes and Plato. Greek tutors were common in Roman aristocratic homes. the cultural cross-pollination was real. But perhaps the biggest difference? Rome lasted. The Athenian democracy thrived for about 100 years until war and internal conflict opened the door to Macedonian conquest. Rome's republic, on the other hand, endured for nearly 500 years, from 509 BCE to 27 BCE. But even Rome's democracy had a shelf life. By the 1st century BCE, civil wars, power grabs, and populist manipulation cracked the system. Figures like Julius Caesar used their popularity to rise above the rules. In 44 BCE, he declared himself dictator for life and was assassinated for it. Ironically, the assassination didn't save the Republic. It shattered it, and from its ruins rose the Roman Empire. Yet even emperors, in their gilded palaces, kept the language of democracy. They maintained the Senate. They used titles like princeps, first citizen. The Republic had become symbolic, but symbols are powerful. Rome's democratic ideas didn't die. They were buried in marble, waiting to be rediscovered. Legacy and rebirth. How Athenian democracy echoes today. If Athenian democracy was a wild experiment and the Roman Republic was its structured sequel, then the modern world is the third act, and that act would have been impossible without the first two. The influence of both Athens and Rome didn't vanish when their systems collapsed. In fact, they went underground, preserved in books, whispered by philosophers, and reawakened during revolutions. Fast forward over 1,000 years. Europe is waking up from the Middle Ages, and thinkers across the continent are digging through ancient texts. Who do they find? Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Hercules. Their writings spark a fire. Civic humanism. This idea that humans should participate in public life starts gaining traction again. The printing press spreads these texts like wildfire. Then, suddenly, Athenian democracy and Roman republicanism aren't just historical footnotes, they're blueprints. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe is brimming with new political theories, and across the Atlantic, a group of revolutionaries is taking notes. When the United States declared independence in 1776, its architects didn't invent democracy from scratch. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Adams were steeped in classical education. Madison, in Federalist Paper No. 63, explicitly compares the U.S. Senate to the Roman Senate, admiring its long-term perspective and stability. The Founding Fathers pulled from Athens the idea of civic participation and freedom of speech. From Rome, they took checks and balances, term limits, representative bodies, and yes, the fear of demagogues. And they weren't alone. The French Revolution of 1789 was also drenched in ancient symbolism. They named their months after Roman ideals, fashioned themselves after Athenian citizens, and used the guillotine to cleanse corruption from their republic. Meanwhile, the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave rebellion in history, was inspired by Enlightenment ideals rooted in ancient democracy. The concept that liberty belongs to all, not just the elite, had finally taken root around the globe. There are over 120 electoral democracies in the world today, according to Freedom House's 2023 report. Each one, in some way, carries the DNA of Athens and Rome. The U.S. Congress, modeled after the Roman Senate. Town halls and local councils, echoes the Athenian Assembly. Constitutions, descendants of the 12 Tables. Even the word democracy comes from the Greek demos, people, and kratos, power. It literally means power of the people. But we've also learned from ancient failures, and we've expanded the franchise. Women vote, minorities vote, and though the fight for equality isn't over, we've come a long way from the narrow citizenship of ancient Athens. We've also developed independent judiciaries, free presses, and human rights protections, safeguards the ancients couldn't have dreamed of. And yet, some things never change. Democracy is still fragile, still messy, still dependent on participation. As Cicero once warned, a nation can survive its fools, but it cannot survive treason from within. Democracy is never guaranteed. It must be defended, every generation, every vote, every voice. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, Then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about ancient Greece and its modern era as well, check out our book, History of Greece, a captivating guide to Greek history, starting from the Bronze Age in ancient Greece through the classical and Hellenistic period to the modern period. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.